Picture a post-apocalyptic world filled with whimsical characters, surreal landscapes, and adventures that defy imagination. Now, imagine a hero and his shape-shifting dog embarking on quests that blend humor, heart, and a touch of the bizarre. This is the enchanting realm of Adventure Time, a one-of-a-kind animated series that has captured the hearts of kids and adults alike. But Adventure Time is not your typical cartoon. It's a kaleidoscope of creativity, a multi-dimensional journey, and a treasure trove of hidden meanings waiting to be explored. So, join us as we dive into the enchanting, often absurd, and always endearing universe of Adventure Time. The action takes place in the land of Ooo. It is the home of Finn, Jake, and all their friends and enemies. It is divided into many different kingdoms, of which the most famous are Fire Kingdom, Ice Kingdom, Slime Kingdom, and Candy Kingdom. Also, there is the Lumpy Space, which is an anti-element. We will not count it as a main one. Finn the human, Jake the dog, and Bimo live in a treehouse located in the Candy Kingdom in the lands of Ooo. As a child, Finn vowed to help everyone who got into trouble. And now, he and Jake rushes off on adventures, saving the inhabitants of the surrounding lands. Each episode has a separate plot, usually unrelated to the others. But the episodes in most cases follow the correct chronological sequence. Adventure Time is another animated series in which the main characters grow up from season to season. In the pilot episode, Finn was about 12 years old. Well, in season 10, in episode 17, he is really 17 years old. Now let's learn more about the main characters. Finn the human is the main character of the animated series, one of several non-mutated humans in the lands of Ooo. He is kind and sensitive, though he can be cruel and angry with his enemies. Finn enjoys fighting, but is incapable of harming innocents. Finn treats everyone knowingly well. He wears a white grizzly wool helmet hat with ears. Jake's parents found him wearing it. He considers those ears his own. And for example, he covers them so he can't hear someone else's conversations. Jake, like Finn, the main character of the animated series, is a mutated magical dog. Finn's best friend and half-brother. Jake has the ability to stretch and control his body, causing it to take any shape he wants. He gained his magical abilities, according to Jake, by wallowing in a magic puddle. He also has a keen sense of smell and can smell objects several miles away. BMO, read as Bimo, is a console-shaped robot that lives with Finn and Jake. Finn and Jake usually play video games on it, but Bimo can function as various electrical appliances, alarm clock, VCR, etc. It can send real creatures into the virtual world, and vice versa. Bimo is a friend of Finn and Jake. It sometimes participates in their adventures and even finds its own. Princess Bubblegum is the princess of the Candy Kingdom. She is 18 years old. But in the Vault episode, Finn specifies that she is several hundred years old, or maybe more.
And PB, you're like a bazillion years old. You're not freaking 19, what the heck?
She looks like a human, but she is made up of sweet biomass, and her hair is made of bubblegum. Princess Bubblegum is a fair and gracious ruler. She loves her subjects and tirelessly guards and protects them. She is kind and gentle with everyone, and adheres to strict moral principles. Finn was rather hopelessly in love with Princess Bubblegum, until the last episode of the 3rd season. Lumpy Space Princess looks like a lilac cloud with a star on her forehead, a sign of royal lineage. She is a friend of Princess Bubblegum, as well as Finn and Jake. In some episodes, she tries unsuccessfully to make Finn fall in love with her. Usually acts like a typical spoiled teenager, rude, constantly thinking about love. Often has a bad relationship with her parents. If she bites someone, the victim will begin to transform into a resident of the Lumpy Space. All residents of the Lumpy Space have the same ability. Marceline is a vampire girl, vampire queen, rock musician, and friend of Finn and Jake. She is about 1,000 years old. However, she looks about 18 or 21 years old. Marceline loves rock music, playing bass guitar, and writing songs. She has 3 bass guitars, but most often plays the one made from her father's axe, with whom she is in a fight. Her father, Hunson Abadir, is one of the antagonists, Lord of the Nightosphere. Hunson possesses an amulet that gives him unlimited power of chaotic evil. which allows him to suck out the souls of his victims. He once ate his daughter Marceline's French fries, which led to the breakup of their relationship. He can absorb souls and grow larger in the process. Let's continue talking about the antagonists of the series. The Ice King is the ruler of the Ice Kingdom, and the main antagonist of the series until Lich's appearance. He is 1,044 years old. He wields magic. He can throw lightning bolts of ice, freeze objects, create monsters out of snow, and can fly with his beard. His magical power is contained in his crown, which he tries not to take off. He has in his power penguins and various ice creatures. On his belly he makes teepees out of hairs. The right hand of the Ice King is Gunter. Gunter often disobeys him and likes to hit bottles. The king doesn't allow him to do this. The Ice King keeps him free, but if Gunter misbehaves, the penguin is locked up. In one episode, the Ice King referred to all of his penguins as Gunther. He's an interesting character, and we'll talk about him in more detail later. The next antagonist is the Lich. When he appears in the series, he becomes the main villain. He is a strong, exuding an aura of death and decay, an immortal necrotic creature that represents the death of all things. He is an ancient cosmic being whose spirit existed on Earth millions of years before the animated series story began via the Catalyst Comet. The Catalyst Comet is a massive comet that falls to Earth every 1,000 years. In episodes Evergreen and Astral Plane, it is shown that the comet repeatedly hits the planet, always bringing with it some kind of change. These are the main characters for now. There will be many others along the way, and we will talk about them later. Now let's move on to the chronological sequence of events of Adventure Time. It starts 13.5 billion years before the Mushroom War and the explosion of the mutagenic bomb. From this point on, the Mushroom War will be our starting point. The Big Bang that caused the formation of the universe. It happened 13.5 billion years ago. And according to the Lich, there was nothing before the explosion. And before nothing, there were monsters like Huntsanabadir and Orgalorg. We'll talk more about this character later. Ever since life began on Earth, there have always been incarnations of the four elements. Throughout the ages and millennia, the four elementals have lived, died, and been reborn again. Elementals are incarnations of the four elements: fire, ice, candy, and slime. One of the elemental, Evergreen, claims that a comet flying at them is incredibly powerful and very deadly. To combat this comet, Evergreen techno-magically creates an ice crowd. It is capable of granting any wish of the bearer. When the elementals refuse to cooperate with this plan, Evergreen freezes them. But at the very last minute, a piece of debris falls on him, and the responsibility for destroying the comet falls to his apprentice, Gunter. But the apprentice's true desire is not to destroy the comet, but to become Evergreen. Because of this, the crown becomes an artifact that can grant the wearer icy powers, at the cost of losing his sanity. The crown also retains a small portion of each wearer's consciousness. Because of this decision of apprentice, a catalyzing comet will fall to the Earth. It will cause a mass extinction. Over 65 million years, the power of the comet turns into the Lich, a monster who swears to kill everybody and everything. 200,000 years before the mushroom explosion. According to Hunson, vampires evolved on Earth before humans, but only emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. 100,000 years before the mushroom explosion. By that time, there were two species living in the crystal dimension: the Korean-speaking rainicorns and a race of talking dogs. For some unknown reason, these two species argue for many millennia, which eventually leads to the start of a war. We know next to nothing about the war, but Jack's drawing may say more than nothing. That UFOs were involved in the war in some way, that dogs used laser weapons, and that nuclear weapons were used. That's what the mushroom cloud hints at. 10,000 years before the mushroom explosion, Orgalorg tries to steal the power of the Catalyst Comet, but thanks to Abraham Lincoln, the King of Mars, manages to prevent this. He sends Grob Gob Glob Grod after Orgalorg to banish him to Earth. Grob Gob Glob Grod uses his flaming sword to send Orgalorg to Earth, causing him to lose his memory, forget who he is and where he came from. The powerful Earth's gravity transformed Orgalorg into a cute penguin, Gunther, about whom we have already talked earlier, for whom visions of the comet are only at their most terrifying moments. During this time, a civilized society appeared on Mars, where everyone became immortal. Golb is a creature with destructive power, appears on Mars and takes the wife of the Magic Man. Her name is Martian. 200 years before the mushroom explosion, Mosef Mo, Mastro Giovanni, forms the Mo Corporation. It is a factory for making intelligent robots, including Mosef's favorite Bimo. Bimo was created to take care of his son. But Mo never got to start a family, and Mosef is slowly but surely turning into a cyborg.
Don't worry, my legs don't work.
Answering Finn if he's human. He says his skin is human. He was once a human like Finn, but due to old age, most of his body parts have been replaced by robots, artificial organs. In other words, he's a cyborg. This is the reason he survives the Mushroom War. 5 years before the mushroom explosion, archaeology professor Simon Petrikov finds an ancient book called the Enchiridion. During an expedition to the Hindu Kush, Simon understands the value of the artifact, but the press and his colleagues mock him. The Enchiridion's origin is unknown, but it is one of the strongest artifacts in the multiverse. It is capable of opening passageways between different universes. That same year, Hansen Abadir gives birth to a human daughter, Marceline. She is half human, half demon. We've talked about her before. A few years later, Simon buys a mysterious crown from an old dock worker in northern Scandinavia. Simon jokingly shows the crown to his fiancée and fellow antique dealer, Betty Gruff. He puts it on his head, and in that moment, the crown begins to transform him. Over the years, Simon's skin turns blue, and his hair becomes long and white. His body temperature gradually drops, and along with the development of icy powers, he begins to lose his mind. Betty runs away after this incident, but in fact, 1,000 years later, Simon opens a portal to say goodbye to Betty. That's where she jumps through, but we'll get to that. The year of the mushroom explosion. Only the elementals, who saw the vision of the ominous future, guessed what was to come. However, the Earth was inhospitable to magic at this time. Therefore, the elementals' efforts were limited. Patient St. Pim, the ice elemental, refuses to die and sinks into the ocean, inadvertently shackling herself in an ice prism that saves her from death. Before the war, humans inhabited most of Earth. It is unknown what started the war. The name mushroom can be thought to be a reference to the mushroom clouds, generated by the explosions of the nuclear weapons used during the conflict. The explosion of the bomb concomitantly releases the bodily incarnations of the Lich. It has also been talked about before. The point of detonation of the bomb becomes a cesspool of toxic waste. Better known as an energy source, the consequences of the Great Mushroom War are global. It's a massive change. In the Earth's climate, cities lose infrastructure. People are near extinction. Touching nuclear waste turns anyone into a mutagenic zombie. All this stuff retains its toxic biological activity for up to 1,000 years. The only bright side is that elementals are reborn. One theory says it was the explosion that caused the Earth to lose a quarter of its part as a planet. Another theory says that a blue comet catalyzer is responsible, which falls to Earth shortly after the Mushroom War, as a counterbalance to the ultimate evil embodied in the form of the Lich. This comet is the embodiment of good, and the result of its first metamorphosis is a butterfly, which eventually becomes Finn the human. 5 years after the mushroom explosion. Despite the global explosion, some people were able to survive, thanks to not being fully human. People like Marceline and Simon stayed alive thanks to magic. Shortly after the explosion, the two find each other and travel together. But Simon is vulnerable to the constant influence of the crown, and due to the increasing need to use its powers for protection, this forces Simon to leave 10-year-old Marceline. Simon disappears before fully transforming into an Ice King. But Simon can't just leave Marceline, so he asks to take care of her, the serial French thief, Hansen Abadir, a father whom Marceline has never met. 13 years after the mushroom explosion. After a failed attempt at guardianship of Abadir, Marceline becomes a vampire hunter. Her demonic personality allows her to adopt the powers of her victims. Several years later, Marceline finds humans, led by two bred Tom, who seems to enjoy sitting around a campfire and singing 80s sitcom sing-alongs. The humans by this time wear animal hats as camouflage and defense against their main enemies, predatory vampires and rainbow horns, who by the way think humans are delicious. The humans are preparing to sail away from the mainland, not only because of the predators, but also because of atmospheric changes. At this time, the last vampire fleet attacks them, led by the vampire King Enzo. Marceline orders the humans to leave without her and kills the vampires herself. But the Vampire King's main goal was to turn Marceline into a vampire. He does that just before he dies, made Marceline the only surviving vampire after a long journey to Bread Tom lands on an island. This island later becomes Founder's Island. Over time, humans populate the surrounding islands as well and build a giant guardian for protection so that no one can get in or out. As technology advances, people create an electronic chip to keep an eye on the inhabitants. As a result, no one leaves the island for almost 1,000 years. 149 years after the mushroom explosion. Global sea level rise and continental shift are causing massive geographic changes. What was once the United States is now a small continuum called the Lands of Oo. By this time, magic has been revived again, making it possible to stop comets. 172 years after the mushroom explosion. The series also features Mother Gum or Pink Something, a collection of living creatures made of mutated gum, spread around the neighborhood. Over time, it appeared around Oo, gained sentience from which two creatures formed. They left the Mother Gum. They were Princess and Nettie. Bubblegum and Nettie built a house around a candy juice tree that Nettie leaned on for a while. Soon after leaving their mother's gum tree in their teens, Bubblegum finds, or rather creates, relatives. Uncle Gumble, Aunt Lolly, and Cousin Chickle. Bubblegum and her relatives start a candy town. They modernize the house, create roads, but Gumble wants to control the candy town all by himself. He plans to use Happy Juice to get rid of Bubblegum and Nettie. Happy Juice is a drink that tames the candy people. It makes them docile, but Bubblegum resists it. Because of this, Gumble becomes a living victim of his own weapon. So do Lolly and Chickle, on whom Gumble had previously tested the juice. They become the first citizens of Candy City, and Bubblegum declares herself a princess. 500 to 700 years after the mushroom explosion, Princess Bubblegum borrows Gumball's idea of building a candy civilization. Her kingdom slowly expands from her treehouse. She creates banana guards and a mint lackey. And she's sort of dating Mr. Cream Puff that Gumball made for her earlier. But in the intermediate stages of development, the princess is kidnapped by Shoko, the reincarnation of the Blue Comet. As a hired thief, Shoko has been sent to steal the amulet of Bubblegum, which she does after earning the princess's trust. But she fails to leave the castle and falls into the radioactive moat surrounding the kingdom. She is becoming the result of a horrible mutation. She dies at the base of the tree. That will eventually become Finn's home. In time, the Candy Kingdom flourishes. The kingdom's success inspires other kingdoms, including the Fire Kingdom, the Slime Kingdom, and the Ice Kingdom, which, by the way, is still under the patronage of Simon Petrikov, but he's better known as the Ice King. 600 years after the mushroom explosion. Meanwhile, Mars is concerned about the possibility of Golb's second coming. To prevent this, a magic man uses his long-standing scientific and magical powers to create the magical automated resistance generating laser energy supplier, or Margles, named after his wife. Despite the advice of his older brother, the magic man goes to the top of Mount Olympus to install the Margles. But unfortunately, because of his feelings for his wife, the Margles gets out of control and falls down. 798 years after the mushroom explosion. After the incident on Olympus, the Magic Man's personality changes dramatically. He starts performing a series of dastardly pranks on the Martians. For example, turning Martian water into an elixir that will turn you bald if you drink it. Abraham Lincoln and Grope, tired of the Magic Man's antics, banish him to Earth. They equip his spaceboat with a special generator. That will only work if the generator senses love. The Magic Man, who is understandably psychologically traumatized, thinks the lander is just broken, so he continues to act like a jerk. 970 years after the mushroom explosion. There is also another character. Billy is a character before Finn and Jake, as well as their idol, as he was the strongest hero in the Land of Oo. He is the only creature in the Land of Oo with 6 fingers, and was also apparently the Lich's main enemy. The Lich reappears to transform the life force of the land into an unholy force. But before he can do so, Billy, a legendary hero of his era, beats him up and seals him in amber, which is in the heart of the candy tree. The tree is able to contain him until he can invade the mind of anyone who gets close enough to him. 984 years after the mushroom explosion, Shapeshifter bites Joshua. He impregnates him, giving his offspring a chance to live a long time. Joshua gives birth to Jake from a lump on his head, and his wife Margaret gives birth to Jermaine, Jake's half-brother. At the same time, on the island, assistant Minerva Campbell and reformed con man Martin Mertens give birth to their son Finn. When Finn was still an infant, people from Martin's past attacked them while Minerva was at work. Martin and Finn escape on a raft during a storm and meet the guard, who stops people from escaping the island. Martin injures the guard and falls into the sea. At this time, the wave caused by the guard's fall sends Finn's raft sailing. They become the first people who leave the island since its founding. Finn survives the long journey with a wand, which produces breadsticks, and eventually, the raft hits the Land of Oo. There he is found by Margaret and Joshua. Susan Strong is sent to find Finn. Martin is rescued by pirates. He's lost his memory. He goes back to his rogue business. His antics reach a new cosmic level, and he's imprisoned in a celestial fortress. It's called the Citadel. 989 years after the mushroom explosion, Dr. Gross, the head of a program to create hybrids, begins to conduct immoral experiments that lead to the emergence of a deadly virus, which infects 62% of the entire population. The mortality rate among her assistants is 100%, but luckily Minerva, Finn's biological mother, manages to upload her mind into the island's computer and creates a network of hundreds of bots. 996 years after the mushroom explosion, on Oo, after Joshua and Margaret die, Finn and Jake move into the treehouse with Bimo. They begin their life of adventure. They go to Mount Cragder, where the Enchiridion was located. The Enchiridion is an ancient book with a code of honor, a guide, and other useful information for the heroes. The book has great power. It can be used to make holes between the dimensions of the multiverse. In this episode, events that can be seen in another show, produced by the same studio, Cartoon Network. This is the show We Bear Bears. There we can see a character of the show, Chloe Park. She is watching Adventure Time on TV, and the same episode that we're talking about right now. We Bear Bears is made in a completely different style. But as well as in Adventure Time, there are deeply thought out characters and plot. A detailed review of this show is also on our channel. And now let's go back to the events of Adventure Time. Finn passes all the tests and shows his true identity as a true hero. He wins the book. In the Lich's amber prison, the snail falls under his spell, releasing him. Finn defeats the Lich, but the Ice King drops Princess Gum by virtue of wealth. This allowed the Lich to possess and control her. They all eventually expel the Lich, but losing candy biomass in the process temporarily rejuvenates Bubble Gum. It makes her 13 years old, and the Lich still has access to that stupid snail. 998 years after the mushroom explosion. After 200 years, the Magic Man returns to Mars to stand trial for his actions. Except that, the Magic Man switches bodies with Jake. Abraham Lincoln realizes his mistake too late. After Jake's sentencing, he offers Death his immortality. In exchange for Jake's soul, Grobglob becomes king of Mars. After the Lich laid low, he leaves the snail's body behind, kills Billy, and possesses his body. Finn then collects the Enchiridion gems for Bill, but once the Lich gets the gems, he opens a portal to Prismo. Prismo is a great spirit who lives in a one-dimensional room in the multiverse and can grant someone one wish of any kind. The Lich wishes for the extinction of all life, but Finn and Jake are saved as they have followed the Lich into the Prismo, which protects them. Until they make their own wish, Finn wishes the Lich never existed, creating an alternate farm world timeline. That's where the mushroom bomb didn't go off, and where Finn, under the influence of the crown, detonates it, and the Lich takes over Jake's body from a parallel universe. But our Jake thereby wishes to change the Lich's wish, sending Jake and Finn back to Ooh, and the Lich becomes incapacitated. 999 years after the mushroom explosion, Finn finds a grass sword with an incredibly powerful, cursed blade. Grass sword appeared to replace Joshua's old broken sword, made from the blood of the demon Keoth. He buys it from Grassy Wizard, who cursed the sword, so that it will be forever bound to its owner. He will be its co-owner for all eternity. Finn figures out how to properly use the cursed blade, while Betty Grove, the fiancée of Simon Petrikov, jumps through that portal. We talked about it earlier. She dedicates herself to saving Simon from the crown. Within a year, she becomes an apprentice to the Magic Man. Finn recognizes that his father was in the Citadel. The incapacitated Lich is still in the prison room and finds a way out. He kills Prismo, or rather his sleepy physical body, and goes to the Citadel as a prisoner. There he melts down the crystal prisons and instigates a mass escape. Finn discovers that his father Martin is a total asshole as he dumps his son. Given that, Finn wanted to stay with him. As a result, Finn loses his arm. Grass Sword creates a small flower on the severed part of Finn's arm. This eventually becomes a full arm, but a green thorn appears on the palm of his hand as a reminder of the cursed sword. Finn slips the Lich an element of the Citadel Keeper's blood, which turns him into a giant harmless child named Sweet Pea. Sweet Pea becomes the adopted child of Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig. Tree Trunks is a yellow and green elephant the size of a pygmy pig. Due to her mild personality, she is seen as Finn and Jake's grandmother. She lives in a pink house in the woods. In Season 4, she falls passionately in love with Mr. Pig. She loves apples and can make delicious apple pies. Mr. Pig lived outside. He also worked for a bandit group, eating their enemies and competitors.
Feed him to the pig.
They're making me do this. I'll try to make it quick.
Possesses a good sense of smell, perhaps only for apples.
Apples? You guys looking for apples?
Prismo's plan B matures, which is incredibly complicated. It involves pickles and dreams. In short, an alternate version of Jake sleeps forever to revive Prismo, while the alternate version of Finn transfers his consciousness into a sword, which is called Finn's Swords. An artificial comet, which is actually Martin's spaceship, is hurtling towards Mars off schedule. For saving his planet from destruction, Grobglob faces the comet head-on, preventing disaster, but sacrificing his corporeal form, and therefore his ability to control Mars. The faces of Grobglob were in outer space, around the Earth as satellites. The Magical Man tries to use Glob's discarded helmet to transform into Grobglob's head, but instead his powers are transferred to Betty. She is immediately overwhelmed by the wizard's madness. The Magical Man becomes the normal man. 1,000 years after the mushroom explosion, the self-proclaimed King of Ooh holds a barely legal election for the position of Princess of the Candy Kingdom. Bubblegum refuses the company and loses. She moves to Gumball's house, but is later reinstated to her position. Thanks to the people of her kingdom, Orgalorg is reinstated due to a perfect combination of events. 1. Globa's death. 2. The proximity of the Comet Catalyst. 3. The presence of a spaceship. Orgalorg launches himself into space, even without realizing the meaning of his actions. In an attempt to once again absorb the Comet Catalyst, Orgalorg's true form is restored, but his full absorption is prevented by Finn's grass arm. For the first time ever, the Catalyst Comet is encountered in an incarnation of the previous comet, and the comet offers Finn a new form of existence, but Finn refuses. He's invested a lot of his time on Earth, and he'd like to see the final result. Afterwards, Finn and Jake return the neutralized penguin Gunter to Earth. Ice Finn, from the Farm World universe, collects all the gems needed for the Lich Jake to create a dimensional portal. Prismo sends our Finn and Jake to take care of it, and they did it, sending the Lich's sentient hand to all dimensions. The correct Lich is killed with a super weapon called the Maid. The Maid is the weapon that Finn and Jake used to try for remove the Lich. It acts as a sidekick, alluding to its name, the Maid. When it fires, a female voice can be heard saying housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
Prismo also removes the crown from Finn from the Farm World dimension, at the request of our Finn. Normal Man removes Glob from orbit, and the two brothers try it on. Glob gives the throne to Normal Man, his younger brother. Mars falls into poverty and disorder. But now the King Man revitalizes Mars and transforms it into a prosperous society. Patient St. Pim, who plunged into the ocean, shrouding herself in an ice prism. She was also mentioned earlier. She awakens and demands that the Ice King kidnap the other elementals. It turns out that Finn's friend Susan Strong is actually Kara the Searcher, who was sent to bring Finn back, but has lost her memory. Susan's search chip malfunctions, but Finn and company use its data to travel to the island. Finn finally meets his mother. And we mean she is still in a loaded state, but Finn finally tells people about Ooh. Also, Finn's grass sword has merged with the Finn swords and forms an alternate version of Finn named Fern. But eventually the tension between Finn and Fern escalates, and in the final fight, Finn destroys Fern. This traumatizes Finn even more than it had before. While Finn is away, St. Pim uses Betty as a battery to charge the other elementals with a spell. But the Ice King interferes with her, and the ritual goes sideways. The elementals turn into superpowered, distorted versions of themselves. Ooh, and everyone who was there turns into one hyper-elemental. Finn works with the Ice King to save Betty. He hands her the Enchiridion from the farm world to reverse the spell. But Betty uses it to go back in time and stop Simon from acquiring the crown. The Ice King stops Betty, and the cosmic energy sends Betty to Mars. Meanwhile, Lumpy the anti-element ends up saving everyone with her sass, causing complete rebirths of life on Ooh, including Bubblegum's relatives Gumbold and Lolly. The Lich's hand causes a sweet slice of bizarre nightmares. Finn follows the hand to the Witch's well of power, and Sweet Pea follows Finn. But instead of reconnecting with the Lich, Sweet Pea rejects the Lich's influence forever. 1001 years after the mushroom explosion, Gumball immediately tries to put his revenge plan into action. He repurposes Fern, the vengeful Green Knight, and builds a huge industrialized kingdom at an impressive rate. Confidence in the inevitability of war increases, and on the battlefield, Finn, Bubblegum, Jake, and Fern are put to sleep with a nightmare mixture. Finn does this in hopes of resolving the conflict in the dream world. It works, and eventually Gold, the King Man, and Betty show up, hoping to save their loved ones. Gold descends from the sky and swallows the Ice King, Betty, and Finn. By the way, Finn went there voluntarily. There they return to their original states, along with the crown. Guys on the outside finds Golb's weak spot. It's harmonized music.
Will happen, happening, happened, and will happen.
It allows Finn and Simon to escape. But Betty stays with the crown, unsure if her power will still work outside of Golb. So she stays, and wishes Golb would disappear, but it doesn't work. She then changes her request to fulfill her most sincere wish, which is to save Simon at any cost. As a result, Betty's wish causes her to merge with Golb. Betty and Golb then leave. The crown is spit out. This time, Gunther gets it. Yes, it's the same penguin who incidentally wants to become the Ice King, from whom the crown will not be separated. 1003 years after the mushroom explosion. After Finn's words, the humans decide to leave the islands. And after 100 years, the humans return to bring human civilization back to Ooh. 2000 years after the mushroom explosion. By the year 2000, the Candy Kingdom is in ruins and seems abandoned. But there are two adventurers traveling through the land of Ooh. Their names are Shermie and Beth, and they may be the future reincarnations of Finn and Jake. They live in Marcellin's old cave house, just like Finn and Jake lived in Marcellin's old tree house. Adventure Time is all about exploration, and the show's ever-expanding world is filled with strange and wonderful places. From the Nightosphere to the Candy Kingdom, it's a visual feast for the imagination. The characters frequently grapple with moral dilemmas, like when Finn faces the consequences of his actions or has to choose between right and wrong. These moments encourage viewers to reflect on their own ethical choices. Adventure Time's ability to seamlessly blend these elements into its narrative is what sets it apart. It's not just a show for kids, it's a multi-layered, emotionally resonant journey that appeals to a broad audience with its unique mix of humor, adventure, and introspection.
Dangerous times, don't fly too high. The sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight.